Hello everyone. Welcome to my teaching learning session and we continue with BPCG, General Psychology in Unit 6. Today we are going to continue with the theories of personality. Personality theory talks about how personality is defined by different psychologists according to their theories, their paradigm and thought process of defining psychology. The first that we will talk about would be continuing with Sigmund Freud. We discussed Sigmund Freud gave a huge set of models to explain his understanding that psychology or a human psyche is understood by unconscious wishes and desires, which is a level of mind which is not something which is available to us most of the time. It's through that our personality development or behaviors in our personality is reflected. We are also going to talk about neo-Freudians, which is people who were followers of Freud but moved away with some discrepancies and difference of opinions with Sigmund Freud, which is Alfred Adler, Carl Jung. We will move to another set of theories, which is behavioral approach, which comes from behaviorism and the theories of learning. Humanistic approach to personality, we'll talk about Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Then we will speak about again a new type approaches and trait approaches, which is Allport's trait approach, Cattell's trait approach, and Ising's trait approach. Mick Gray and Costa's Big Five theory. And last and finally, we will talk about today is assessment of personality. So, going ahead with Freud's concept, we will continue with the development stages of Sigmund Freud after the differences that we continued with. Sigmund Freud stated that personality can be understood in the development of five stages, which is starting from conception till 16 to 18 years of life, are five stages that takes care of our personality development. By 18, the personality development, according to Sigmund Freud, was complete. So after that, any changes in human mind and body does not make any difference to our personality, according to Sigmund Freud. There are five stages. These stages were called as psychosexual stages. The reason was that Sigmund Freud stated that his stages talk about learning and understanding psyche by knowing the desires which are more biological and sexual tone in a human individual, and all the unconscious, which is a level of mind which is not available to us, will talk about that this unconscious has desires which are unacceptable, desires which are guilty, shameful, and something which is of sexual tone, and these desires leads to development of personality. That's why it is called as psychosexual development. Speaking of what he stated that in order to move from one stage to another, we need to resolve the stage, which is resolve the problem or accomplishment that each stage has. That suggests that every stage has one sort of achievement that needs to be completed. If we are not completing that stage successfully, it will lead to something which is called as fixation, which is a continuation of an early mode of satisfaction in life. So if you're able to take care of that stage, resolve that conflict which is available at that stage and move ahead, then successfully we will move to the second stage without anything which is unsolved in the prior stage. For example, if we are not able to accomplish the task, we are not able to resolve the conflict of the previous stage, that will lead to fixations in our life. What are called as fixations? Fixation is arresting at any stage, which is development getting stopped and arrested at that stage, which might hamper the development in later stage of life. The example has already been stated and quoted here. We will discuss it as per the first stage. Oral stage is also the first stage of human development according to Freud, and any arrest, any sort of conflicts not getting resolved at this stage would lead to addictions. It could be smoking, chewing gums, a habit of talking too much, drinking, and anything in which is in concern with mouth, which is could be weed, could be drugs, could be drinking, smoking, talking too much in uncensored conversation with people, which is talking way too much, which is not required. Now, stages, let's start with Freud's stages of development. The first stage was called as the oral stage. This stage starts from conception, which starts from the time the conceived child is born, which is the infant. So, from 0 to 18 months, this development stage goes on. They stated that every stage, according to Sigmund Freud, comprises of an erogenous zone. Erogenous zones are zones which require satisfaction for human development. So, if a zone is satisfied, conflict is resolved, then we are successfully able to move to the next one. So, as per the oral stage, that zone of pleasure seeking or satisfaction is the mouth. That's why children are completely dependent on their parents for feeding, cleaning, eating, and also the major focus of the child is always the mouth, the feeding, the eating. Everything is done with the mouth in terms of caretaking of the child. So they drive pleasure and understand the world only by suckling and swallowing things. And that's how, the trust is developed by the child over the mother. When the child is fed on time, the child is taken care of on time. And, the cycle of sleeping, feeding, especially the stimulation to the mouth, if is done on time, that stage gets its conflict resolved. There is no arrest, there is no fixation. So, also remember, we should not be over gratifying or under gratifying any stage. That is fixation of that stage, then. So, it is mentioned as we can see on the slide also. Over gratification or under gratification may lead to development, which leads like underdevelopment, which is fixation, which is overreacting behaviors might happen in later stages of life. That's why if a child is underfed, which is the stimulation in the mouth, feeding, suckling, swallowing, is not done properly to the child suffers from any kind of addiction which is concerned to mouth. That's why smoking, drug addiction, alcohol, chewing gums, this come as an addiction or a concern in the later stages of life. Freud also called that these people are over in cooperative or oral ingestive. During this stage, children experiences pleasure by chewing, biting. That's the reason, the mothers usually after weaning off the child from 6 months does give something to the child for teething, feeding, so that the stimulation is well maintained till at least 2 years of life. So this is which is the first stage. The zone which requires satisfaction in the oral stage is the mouth, and if it is not satisfied, it could lead to any sort of addiction which is concerning the mouth. And also, Freud stated that the overreacting behavior over here, if the stage get arrested, is called as over oral incooperative or oral ingestive. So this goes from first stage. Let's take an example. If a child successfully moves from the first to the second stage is the anal stage. Now, this is the time where the child is approximately 2, 3, 3 plus. In an Indian scenario, we can also take children to be 3 plus at this point of time. During this stage, children demand that the children, accomplish or probably satisfy the demand of society. This demand of society is at 3 plus the child is going to go to any sort of day, school, any sort of formal organization. It could be a daycare, it could be a formal school organization also. The society demands discipline, which is toilet training. The child should be capable of taking care of themselves out in the outside world. So in the face of the demand of the society, for the first time, to control and delay the expulsion of urine and bowel movement, which is feces and the urine, the child learns the control over their anal part, which is again the erogenous zone, which requires satisfaction at this time is toilet training. Training of the child to control their bowel movement, so that the time they want to go to the washroom should be disciplined for them. In what time they can control, what's the right time, right place. This entire control is required by the child, and acing this is an important part of this stage. If the child is able to do it, he is able to face the demand of the society. Also, Freud believed that too harsh or too lenient of toilet training can cause fixation like any other stage. So fixation takes place when you are under satisfied or you are overdoing that stage. So let's take an example. If a child is way too over satisfied, the toilet training has been way too strict, the child usually controls himself. This also happens, when parents are stating the child that do not go to the washroom until I come to pick you up. So at times there are 3% 4 to 4.5, 5 years old kid whose schoolings are only till 5, 12:30 in the in the noon time, the early noon time, and it starts at 8:39 and finishes at 12:30. So the parents are telling them not to use the washroom because of disciplinary issues. What are we doing? We are making the child over control their bladder movement. They do not go to expel their urine or feces, and they tend to control the bowel movement. That extreme control leads to too much of orderly control on themselves, being too tidy, being too neat, over discipline, which could also lead to obsessive compulsive disorders in the later time, which is when we are being too tidy and too orderly. Now, for example, if the toilet training has not been done really well of the child is completely left on his own. Do whatever that you feel right. If such a statement is given, fact that the child goes anytime, anywhere. Remember, their clothings are not tidy. One hook of the shirt button is not tied on. Their belts are open. This is a stage where the child is too messy and the child does not learn when to control. The expulsion and retention is not told properly. This could lead to under control, and later in life, these people could be, lacking discipline, very messy, lesser control over themselves, and but they tend to be very generous, very giving. Whereas on the other end, as I said, if the toilet training is too harsh, the anal stage is taking too much of power, and we are too strict with ourselves in toilet training, then that time that could lead to something which is rigid people, too tidy and orderly, which could lead to even OCD, and very stingy people who lack adjustment. So this is how fixation might impact us in later life. Let's move to the third stage. As soon as the child crosses that 3-4 years of life, the child enters to that stage of 4 and 5. Especially in Indian scenario, I would say this stage of phallic stage, which is next, goes on till probably 7 to 8 years of our life, and probably seven. I think seven is the maximum in Indian scenario. In the Western scenario, we can say it's 5 plus. So this phallic stage now, which is the erogenous zone in the phallic stage? It is the genitals. Genitals is understanding that in terms of pleasure seeking, part of the body is genital. So that's the time the children also get to know that their parents are holding a separate, genital, and they are of a separate genital, which is a male body is different from the female body. Children at this point of time, which is 6 years, actually get to know the kind of relationship their parents are holding with one another. So they get to know that the kind of relationship that they hold with their parent, which is if it's a boy getting to know that what the kind of relationship that he holds with the mother is very different to the kind of relationship the mother holds with the father. So this, remember, here the erogenous zone is the genital, and that's why children are usually caught touching their genital parts most of the time, which parents discipline their children when when there is a random touching of their genitals, and parents usually strictly give them punishment for the same too. During this stage, they understand the difference between males and females, as I said, and Freud proposed that the male experiences a complex which is called the Oedipus complex. Now, Oedipus complex was a real story. The Oedipus complex was a real scenario of the Greek times. There was a Greek king which was killed by his own son, and the son, who was the prince, was called Oedipus. Oedipus fell in love with his mother. So, falling in love is not the kind of mother-son love, the love that a father has to the mother. So the son fell in love with the mother, and with the help of their sister, the prince Oedipus killed his father. Also, in the times of Roman and Greek time, we need to know there's a lot of a lot of hustle for the throne, a lot of charge which was required, that who will be throned and dethroned, and this such kind of conspiracy was very common by the family people. So Oedipus was one of the sons of a Greek king who killed him because he fell in love with the mother, and he convinced the sister for the same, and such a rivalry for the father, as well as the threat of getting punished from the father, made him kill his father, and his desire for the mother increased with the passage of time. This was called the Oedipus complex. This is the real story which happened with a male complex, which was Oedipus. Now, for women, it was created by Sigmund Freud. Freud said that this complex is called the Electra complex for girls. Now, girls also experiences the same feeling for their father, and because of the jealousy, they hate their mothers at this point of time. Remember, this stage only stays. This kind of love and affection, which is too strong, only stays for approximately 2 years and 1.5 year, ideally 1.5 year, and resolution also takes place. Now, successful resolution of this stage is extremely important, because this is one of those building block stages where we get to know what are we in terms of our body, our gender, our sex. That's why successful resolution happens of this complex where a mature sexual identity takes place. That means the boy tends to role model the father, and the girl tends to role model the mother. So with the passage of time, this hatred towards the father, the hostility towards the father, which made the son fall in love with the mother, changes into admiration for the father. The admiration for the father usually takes place when resolution is about to happen. So from that hatred, hostility, with the passage of time, the child also understands the kind of relationship the father and the mother has is the kind that we probably will not be able to hold with the mother. And that's the time the children are wearing their father's blazers and coats and showing it to their mothers, and the girls are wearing mother's saris and dupattas to show and act like the mother. So that's the time where the admiration and role modeling starts and resolution starts happening. If this resolution happens, this stage development is successful and goes on. Now, moving to the next stage, that after the phallic stage, we have the genital stage, the latency stage. This is at the time of 6 to 12, which is just before puberty. This is such a magical sort of a stage where all your sexual energy that were there, like just a stage before, at the age of 4 and 5, is completely forgotten, and all the sexual energy is diverted and moved towards educational, sports, social activities, etc. So this leads to no interest in opposite gender, and this is true at the time of 6 and 7. There's so much of competition in education. Who's winning in science? Who's going for quiz competition? All the energy is diverted towards sports, education, and social activities. Now, moving to the last stage, according to Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud says if there is no sort of fixation, the child, and if the child goes on successfully from one stage to the other, this stage, which is the stage of a stage where heterosexual development, proper heterosexual development, comes again. This is the time that sexual energy returns to human body, but in a very good manner, which is we understand to develop heterosexual relationship with the opposite gender. Successful completion of this stage will make you a mature man or a mature woman who is capable of having a healthy relationship with an opposite gender, where there are unresolved issues of the prior stage. No issues from the prior stage will help you develop a healthy heterosexual relationship with an opposite sex. This is the last, which is the genital stage, which talks about successful reaching of this stage tells that your personality development, according to Sigmund Freud, and the psychosexual development has been completely correct. This completes with Sigmund Freud. Now let's move to Neo Freud. See, the concept of Sigmund Freud was very different from the others. He stated that we have something which is the unconscious. We have something which are unfulfilled desires, shameful, guilty desires, sexual desires, which are impending, not correct in the unconscious, which is getting us the behavior and leading to our personality. Then came the Neo-Freudians. Neo-Freudians were somebody who were followers of Freud only, which is they worked with Freud. They were a part of his work, but they later moved away from him because of some difference of opinion that they had. So Neo-Freudians are also called as Neo-Analytic and Post-Freudian. So let's with the next move to the first Neo-Freudian that we are going to discuss today. This is the Adler's theory, which is also known as individual psychology. Alfred Adler was very different from the others. He stated that there is a concept called individual psychology. He believed that experiences of of early childhood shape one's personality, and if if you encourage the child during their childhood times, it would motivate them to become more capable. So if you tell the child that he's capable of doing something, he will become more confident about himself. If you tell them that with people work is best done, the child will become cooperative and will have a healthy relationship with people. Whereas if the child is discouraged, the child will develop a sense of incompetency, will show withdrawal behavior, and unhealthy competition of jealousy and enviousness. Also, he named that there's a striving force that we all have, which is the force that is striving for all of us to become a perfect version of us. That said, that helps us to lead to fulfill our goals. So he said everyone has a personal force that makes us reach towards perfection. And these force were called as personal goals. These personal goals are something which is a part of everybody. Every individual has these personal goals, and if anybody has these, it leads to a good sense of achievement. They have something, a purpose to life, purpose to have something reach, an achievement, and that's what lead to perfection in them. Also, he stated a concept of inferiority and superiority complex. This is something which is very common and experienced by everybody. uh, Superiority and inferiority complexes are complexes which says that Adler stated that all of us experiences a sense of weak, less capable ideology about ourselves. So while we are growing up, some way or the other, we have some sense of some lack that we experience. This could be being dependent on other people and etc. In relationship to anybody. It could be an older sibling, it could be parent, it could be caregivers, it could be friends. So this less capable feeling that we experience, it's innate and natural for everybody to have, but overcoming this feeling is what leads to resolution of inferiority complex and striving for success, and resolution of this leads to achievement of superiority in every individual. So some common stuff that he mentioned is that all of us experiences something which is as inferiority, less capacity, feeling dependent, feeling incapable. But resolution happens when we tend to resolve this inferiority in the form of superiority, which is resolving it, moving away from it, moving towards our personal goals, which helps us attain perfection, and probably resolving these concerns of inferiority and moving to superiority. The last that he gave a concept was sibling rivalry, which is very commonly seen in every family, and birth order. Birth order was a concept given by Sigmund Freud. We can see it from the picture also, that the order in which the child is born also defines their personality. So, according to Adler, the firstborn children were responsible, they're highly motivated, they're confident. They're very protective, perfection seeking people, very bossy also. Whereas in the middle born children usually are the most adjusting individuals. If there's a second born and there's another third born, they can be sometimes rebellious, but they're very people pleaser and filled with adjustment and coping with people, very good with other people. And then we have someone as last borns. Last borns are people who are quite rebellious. They are self-centered, very charming people, very outgoing. They first think about themselves and then any. Because of the fact that they're the last borns in the family, they tend to be pampered also a little. Then we have the only born child. If there's no sibling in the only born child, these people are they seek approval. They're very smart. They're confident. They are center of attention. They love being that. They're way too mature of their age. They're very conscientious, responsible, and yes, again like the firstborn, they crave for perfectionism. So these were concepts which was given by Adler. Adler also moved away from Sigmund Freud, and the reasons were these: individual psychology, inferiority superiority complexes, striving for perfectionism, and sibling rivalry and birth order. Now, let's move to another neo-Freudian, which was Carl Jung. Carl Jung is the Jung is a German word, so we don't call it as Jung, we call it as Jung. And he was a Swiss psychiatrist, a very close friend of Sigmund Freud, but moved away, but keeping some part of his theory alive in his theory. Analytical psychology or analytical theory was the concept which was given by Carl Jung. Carl Jung did extend the concept of unconscious of Sigmund Freud, but in a very different manner. Carl Jung deviated and stated, apart from the unconscious, we have a concept of collective unconscious. And this collective unconscious does not comprise of hidden wishes, desires, and motives. Rather, it comprises of something which is an evolutionary part coming from ages to us, and they are universal in nature. We all carry it. So, for example, in an entire family, that collective unconscious primarily would be 60 to 70% common. Why? Because it's coming from the past to everybody same, universal in nature. We carry the same, past as ancestral in nature, and that's why it's common, universal. And another term that he stated for these were archetypes. So this element of archetype are called as primordial images. What are primordial images? Images of the past, images which is the first form images of our life, which could be best examples as motherland, mother, God. So which are shared by all humans. So let's take an example for mother. Mother is a concept which is shared by any culture, any feature of the world as common to be as primary caregiver. We expect mothers to be unconditional lovers, to be sacrificing, to be giving, to be knowing everything. So again, remember it's collective unconscious, universal, common to all of one area or one culture, and it's something which is carried on from past ancestral time. So it talks about archetypes which are a part which are filling what? The collective unconscious. So it's not the hidden desires and motive, it's the archetype, common universal thoughts and feelings that we all carry. Now, he also stated that there is a self, the knowing about the wholeness of one's own identity. So, according to Adler, our self talks about striving for unity and balance within ourselves. So, he stated one of the basic assumption of Carl Jung was that we should be not the competing forces which are within ourselves should not be fighting with the forces of society, rather fighting within our conflicts, balancing them and leading to equilibrium within ourselves. So that's why he stated that self is the wholeness of one's own identity, which is we should be striking that balance within ourselves rather than fighting with the society's norms, society's cultures and stereotype forming. I'll give you a best example for this is, you know, when we talk about LGBTQ and we talk about homosexuality and coming up the third gender that is coming to play in our country, as humans, when we do not associate to them, we deject them, we demean these genders. Again, self is about forming unity and whole within yourself. You need to maintain that unity within yourself, fight your own forces, compete with your own forces, and compete and become a unique whole individual. But if we fight with these genders to remove them from the society, to put them away from the society, that is not going to lead with the development of self. Also, he spoke about a concept of persona, the phony self that we show to the others, which is very true. Persona is like a mask; it's something that we show to the world, which is very rightly told about him. And there were some characteristic features that was given by Carl Jung, which was anima. Anima is the feminine side of the male. Animus is the masculine side of the female. According to him, shadow was the darker side of our lives and personality, which consists of biological urges, aggressive drives, feelings of inferiority that we comprise of. So that finishes with Carl Jung. Very different as a concept. He extended the concept of unconscious, but I think probably gave a collective unconscious, which is ancestral in nature, common to all, universal, and had archetypes within it. Archetypes are primordial images, probably of a culture, society, or area. Then we speak about these archetypes are shared, have an oversharing quality. Apart that, he stated few of the qualities of humans, that we have a concept of self, a persona, and then features of this, which is anima, animus, shadow. So when we speak about self, self talks about maintaining wholeness of one's identity, which is we need to be unique, we need to be filled with our own selves rather than competing with the forces outside, rather maintaining the equilibrium by solving the conflicts within ourselves, then the persona, and then the shadow, the anima, and the animus, which every one of us, which is that entire self, comprises of. So yourself will have an anima and animus and a shadow and your persona that you show to the world. So this was a concept which was analytical psychology by Carl Jung, very different, something which was away from what we could imagine to be functioning in the society. Then we came to a new approach which is called the behavioral approach. Behavioral approach has been repeatedly done with the concept of general psychology, learning psychology. Behavioral approach speaks of analytical theory. It was main critique of analytical theory. They stated that we reject the idea of Sigmund Freud. There is no concept of unconscious. There are no sexual desires. They said that we study scientific things. So according to J.B. Watson, who was the founder of behaviorist, and B.F. Skinner, who was one of the most influential behaviorists, stated that we have to understand something which is visible to us. So what is visible to us? Behaviors are visible to us. Behaviors could be understood in an association, always in an association of stimulus and a response. So for example, if it's hot, you turn off the fan. Behavior is coming, that heat is leading for a stimulus and the response is putting on the fan. You're thirsty, stimulus, response is drinking the glass of water. So all the behaviors are understood under the notion, under the theory of stimulus response and reward and punishment. So we do not show a behavior because we know that we are being rewarded, or not show a behavior because we know that we are being punished. So he behavior is stated that the focus of the study for understanding psyche should be behaviors, not unconscious motives and desires. So they explain this entire concept with three theories that we've done repeatedly, which is learning theories, which is classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning of Albert Bandura. This completes with behaviorism. Let's move to a third force approach, which was way away from those times, which is called as the humanistic approach. Humanistic approach was to personality was also called as humanistic. The reason for them was that the reason for this was that humanistic approach given by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow stated that other people, especially Freud, had a very pessimistic view about humans. He stated that humans are far more capable, far more growing and actualizing than what Sigmund Freud showed. Sigmund Freud, he said, showed a very pessimistic view, a very darker view of humans, which is having unconscious shame, guilt, motives, and desires. He said, ideally, humans are very positive, always having the capacity to innately grow. So, this was humanism. The major two psychologists that we have in humanism is Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. And when we speak about Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow gave one of the most famous theories of psychology, which is applicable in industrial field and educational field even today. His theory was the hierarchy of needs that that we speak of. So speaking of hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow stated that the human behavior could be understood by these hierarchy of needs that we have, which suggests that we are able to understand the humans by the needs which go from up the hill, low the hill from up the hill. So, for example, when we speak about these needs, there are five in nature. This starts from the lower need and goes on and achieving the highest need. This highest need is called actualization, which is the self actualization. So, speaking of this, self actualization is something which would be, speaking about reaching your highest potential. And with this theory, he's mentioned that humans, a basic assumption of Abraham Maslow was that humans have that innate tendency of growth, which is we are born with the tendency of growing all the time. So having a goal, achieving it, having a goal, achieving it. What are we doing? We are always moving ahead. This is something that we, as humans, we all can see within ourselves. We have one task, we complete that task, we want something else. You start working somewhere as students, as psychologists, as counselors, you'll achieve that once you solve one case, once you have an understanding of one case, you want something else to come onto your platter. That's the innate drive to achieve and keep growing. So let's now discuss how do we lead to this actualization. This was done by understanding the five needs that we have, which is physiological, safety, social, and esteem needs. So how do we start? The physiological, safety, and social are called the lower needs. I'll give you an example of probably let's take an example. We go to fetch a job, and there's an advertisement that you see that has job opportunities, and physiological need is hunger, thirst, shelter, clothing. You see that the package, the CC, the compensation which is being given to you as the individual is perfect, and you go for that job and apply for it. So application went in because the physiological need of you understanding the job can fulfill my physiological needs, which is hunger, thirst, shelter. That's the reason you apply to that job. Once you've applied, you go for it. Then while going, you see that the place is very safe. You get so much of commutation. There's a metro, there are cabs, there are private public transport which is available to your workplace, and the workplace itself has a very beautiful aura and a very comfortable aura in adjusting people over there. You feel safe in that environment. You feel, okay, this is the kind of place I always wanted to work in. After understanding that area, after feeling safe, you agree, you take up the job. Now once you take up the job, you find very familiar faces, you become friends with people, Your bosses are very supportive, helpful. You form a social connection, membership to something in the organization, a cultural group now you're a part of, etc. So social, which is the need of belonging, comes in when you become, when you affiliate yourself to people, group, and organization. Once this affiliation tends to happen, it's the time that you take up goals and rules and you start achieving them. Once achievement takes place, that's the time that esteem starts growing in. You start recognizing, start achieving your goals, start achieving your project. This is the higher need. From achievement starts the higher need, which leads to step of achievement, achievement, and achievement. Which is, esteem tells you to achieve needs, become more self-confident. You become aware what you can do and what you cannot do. So this is which leads to self-esteem development. And once you know that this is something that I'm very good at, it's the time that you start reaching and tapping your highest potential. Accomplishments are bigger, projects are bigger, you achieve a bigger post in your workplace. It's self-actualization. This is how all of us achieve self actualization, which is growth, which is innate in nature, growth, which is something which we all want to achieve every time. So that's something which we speak of as self fulfillment, being the highest need for us, which is also called as self actualization. One of the most famous theories of Abraham Maslow humanistic approach. This theory can be applied to any field, industrial, organizational, educational, even human lives also. We form relationship because we feel that our basic needs, desires would be satisfied with a person X. Then you move ahead, you start feeling safe with the person, you start hanging out, going out, and then it's the time that you start feeling very secure, and then you start affiliating yourself with the person, which is you start calling yourself in that relationship as we, as partners. Once you start acclaiming publicly yourself as a group, is the time that you start recognizing it. Recognizing will talk about taking approval from the society. Once the approval takes place, you finalize that relationship on at a public platform, which is actualization and potential filling of that relationship. This is the way that Abraham Maslow stated that humans are very positive, very capable of themselves, and are something which talks about achievement every time. We are capable of it. We have a free choice and will to know that what we can achieve and what we cannot. This completes with Abraham Maslow's theory, and let's move to the second part of the theory, which was given by Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was another psychologist along with Abraham Maslow of humanistic approach. He also stated that humans are good, their behaviors are goal directed, they always look forward to something which they can achieve. And according to him, there are two types of selves. He gave a very structured theory of self, which is called as this theory of self, where there are two selves, real self and ideal self. So the real self is your self concept. Real self is you knowing who you are, who you actually are as a person. And the ideal selves are the self that you want to aspire, the experiences that you have, the kind of process of thought that you build in with time, which makes you achieve something, aspire to be something. So that's an ideal self, like the term suggests. He mentioned that if there is an overlapping between the real and the ideal self, so if your real and your ideal self is very similar, that leads to you becoming fully functional, very adjusted individual in the environment. For example, if a person wants to become a psychologist and has the trait of empathy, is practicing, interning, building that expression of convincing, that expression of understanding human behavior from all the eclectic process, that is the real self, merging with the ideal self. Now there's someone who want to become a psychologist, but is very cold, is very distant from human relationship, has no understanding of the psychological theories, but is interning with the idea of becoming one. So the real and the ideal self is not overlapping, they're quite distinct, they're quite away from one another. So this is what is probably not going to lead to fulfillment. It will lead to non-adjustment, lead to conflicts, it will lead to disheartenment, unsatisfaction, and unhappiness in the person. So when there is overlapping of the real and the ideal self, that leads to congruence. Congruence is moving in one direction. When there is lesser overlapping between the real and ideal self, it leads to incongruence, which is disequilibrium. There is no management of what you call as your real and ideal self. They do not match with one another. They would lead to a lot of conflict, a lot of what do you call this, a lot of disgust within oneself, unhappiness and dissatisfaction. So he gave also the concept of fully functioning people, but that on contrary there is no congruence between the two versions of self would lead to no fully functioning person. These were one of the two best theories of humanism that came up, and also is one of the best theories that we could look forward to today while we treat people with defects of self actualization, lack of achievement, failures in life, self doubt. These were theories that could support us in dealing with that. Then, speaking of another type of theories which was given by personality theorists, which was called as trait theories. Before that, let's understand what are traits. Traits are, in a simple layman language, adjectives that we provide to ourselves while we are describing ourselves to people. So, talkative, social, gregarious, will probably tell you as an extrovert, shy, reserved, conservative. These are traits. These adjectives are your description of your persona. And these traits are relatively stable across time and situation. They only change through an external environment or a trauma in the external environment. Moving ahead, the trait theories, one of the most pioneer trait theories that we had was Jordan Allport. Jordan Allport has been of a time where he stated that there are number of categories. There are around 1,000 2,000 adjectives, and we cannot cluster traits like this. So he gave three types of traits in a hierarchy, which is the lowest was the highest was something which is cardinal trait. Cardinal traits are traits which are more generalized, something which is like one trait which stands for you. So they stand at the top of the Allport's theory of hierarchy. They stated this dominates one's personality. So it's like a life goal, and you can actually identify that person with that life goal of him or her. So like Mahatma Gandhi's non-violence, Mother Teresa's care and social work, and Hitler's domination. All of this is something which is one trait explaining the entire personality. So that goal of one's life that could become something as the personality. So that's why they're most dominant, highly generalized, very pervasive, like something which is very dominant in people. Then we come to something which is the central traits. Central traits are something which every individual has approximately 5 to 10 in nature. And speaking of 5 to 10 in nature, which is they are varying in degrees, which could be like talkative, support, helpful, at the same time being selective. So these were number in people. These are the kind of traits which are generalized, but not something that you can define a person's personality. They're more in number. They're not one, rather 5 and 10. You put this in your CVs, curriculum vitae. You put it in your resume. You put this in your letter of recommendations. People recommend you with these traits, which are the central traits that you have. So these traits could be loyal, aggressive, if any. It could be intelligent, it could be helpful, supportive, cooperative, and etc. So these are five or probably more in people. Then we have the last one, which is called the secondary trait. Secondary traits are traits which is less relevant in people, not something which is vastly seen. They're not very highly generalized in people. They are something which is less generalized in people, and they are also situational based traits. So like the kind of cuisines, the kind of colors people like, the kind of environment, the kind of nature people like. So it's something which keeps changing according to situations and circumstances. They are not permanent. They do not remain the same. So it could be an aggressive child may not speak in front of the teacher, whereas the trait is aggressive, but you do not reflect it in front of a teacher. Over talkative, individual might not speak in front of their boss. So this is something which keeps changing, a trait which keeps changing as per situation, context, and environment. So these could be choices of food, color, people, nature that can change. Not very pervasive, not very highly generalized. Then we come to something which is another trait theory, which was Raymond Cattell, who was given the most famous personality test, which is 16 personality factor questionnaire. He found out that in the Allport's list there were 4,500 English adjectives. He felt that those English adjectives, putting them into three kinds of traits, let's just use a empirical method of devising them into different kind, and put them into factors, which was 16 personality factors that we have, which are these. So he used factor analysis, which was a statistical tool, and reduced the 4500 adjectives of Jordan Alport into just 16 bipolar tendencies, which is a person can be either reserved or outgoing, practical or theoretical, anxious or calm, submissive or dominant, serious or fun loving, carefree or conscientiousness, shy, bold, tough minded, sensitive, trusting, suspicious, hands on people and being imaginative, forthright people being shrewd, being self assured, or in opposite, being apprehensive, traditional or experimental, being interdependent or independent, undisciplined, disciplined, and controlled, and relaxed in being tense. These were 16 factors which actually came out from factor analysis. One of the most popular factor questionnaire also was given by Raymond Cadet. Then after this came Ising. Ising was, Hans Ising is the person, is the psychologist who was a contemporary psychologist of Cadet. Worked with him, supported Cadet, but he proposed that our personality just comprises of two dimensions, two major dimensions that we have, which is extroversion and introversion, emotionally stable and neuroticism. So, according to Ising, an individual ideally has only these two dimensions. You are either extrovert, introvert, or neuroticism or emotionally stable. So, your entire personality is around that. So, later, giving these tendency, he also found a third one, which was psychoticism versus socialization, which is either you are neurotic. Neurotic are people who are moody, anxious, always apprehensive, always overthinking about things. And in opposite to that, there are people who are emotionally stable. They're calm, they're fun loving, they're very practical and very hands on to things and situations. They are something in opposite of something which is neuroticism. Extroversion and introversion is being extroverted, being something which is fun loving, being socializing all the time. And then there is another one which is opposite of extroversion, which is introversion, shy, timid, reserved people. And the third one later that he added was on the terms of psychoticism, which is people who are hostile to the environment and people dangerous, deviant people. And socialization are people who are healthy, fun loving, very social to the society. So we're talking in terms of society, not in terms of person. Like introversion, introversion is to you interpersonally, socialization is to the society as a whole. So that completes with Ising theory, which has three major dimensions as quoted. Now let's move to one of the biggest theory and one of the most theoretically popular theory, which is called the Big Five Factor Theory. Before we move to assessment of personality, Big Five Factor Theory was a theory which was given by Meg, Costa, and Cray. He gave five different factors, which was also called as OCEAN. The acronym was given as OCEAN, which is openness to experience, consent. Openness to experiences are people who are very open to different cultures, very acceptable, very open people, helpful to other people, not very rigid, flexible ones. Conscientiousness are people who are rational, thought process, practical at the same time, but at the same time very correct, very achievement oriented and hardworking. And opposite of this is going to be people who are shrewd and self-centered. Extroversion, opposite introversion. Agreeable are people who are very helpful, very supportive and cooperative. Where agreeable opposite would be someone who is very rigid. And neuroticism are people who are anxious and moody, and opposite is something which is emotionally stable. OCEAN is OCEAN, which is an acronym of the same. So after this, we come to the last part of personality, which is assessment. Assessment was extremely important part of personality. How do we identify individual differences in people, and how do we identify the deviances in personality? Through assessment, through structural administration of tests which are empirically tested and done on personality. Why do we do it? In order to give diagnosis, to understand differences. Diagnosis is identifying the defects and deviances in personality. That deviances tells us that what kind of psychological treatment is required. And the last is the the testing also helps us in organizational society and in a school environment, in the world environment, to identify what are your actual features or personality descriptions. So this was the need of personality testing. We have two kinds of personality tests: self-report, which are also called as direct test, and projective test, which are also called as the indirect test. So let's first start with, this is the big five that you can look down to on the image over there that we just discussed. This is the acronym given for ocean that we have. Now, continuing the personality assessment, let's start with the first one, which are called the direct test. Self-report are called self-report measures because this is about reporting your own self on the test, which is it's a paper pencil test where you write your own answers. This is very quantitative in nature. It is fairly structured. It requires you to answer on the face value. These are also psychometric in nature, which is very empirically tested, which is scientifically tested, give accurate results. The fact that they're quantitative in nature, which is their scoring is quantitative, statistical, they're more accurate than any other testing. We have norm table. Further after scores, we have a norm table and then the interpretation. So self-reporting, because we ourselves do these tests and report ourselves. Then we talk about projective testing. Projective testings are testing that is based on psychoanalytical theory. We'll do the difference also. They're also called the indirect test. Now the reason is that, and why are they indirect? First of all, that they identify personality by identifying the unconscious feelings and desires which are suppressed somewhere. So we are not doing, understanding the conscious level of the personality, which comes through self-report measure. We understand the projective thing, which is the hidden part. So projective techniques are indirect because they take out the unconscious feelings and desires of you outside and tell you something which can the direct test cannot tell you. So Sigmund Freud stated that these techniques are far more better than the direct test because direct test only tells you something that you want to tell in the self-report measure. Whereas the indirect test will take out those unconscious wishes, desires, shameful feelings, or guilt, which is always suppressed in your unconscious. Also, he stated it's indirect because the questions are not in question format, but they're in the format of in block test, they're very vague and ambiguous. They're pictures in blocks, incomplete sentences. And some of the examples of the projective test are Rorschach in block test, thematic apperception test, Holtzman Rorschach test, Holtzman in block test, and draw person and sentence completion test. Some of the examples. And self-report measures example is 16 personality factor questionnaire. So this is the kind of vague, ambiguous, things that we see in terms of projective technique. Whereas in self-report measures, we see question answers. So the testing tools are different. The interpretation in the projective test is quite huge, large interpretation. We require an extensive amount of training to do projective tests, else it could give us more error than any good. Also, its reliability and validity is something which cannot be considered much because it's not there. Reliability and validity is less. And when we talk about self-report measure, it's highly accurate, highly reliable. Now, let's give a little introduction today before we finish for the next unit, which is human development. Human development is one of the core part of general psychology. We will discuss in human development the nature and principle of human development. We'll understand what is human development, the definition of lifespan development, factors influencing development, the issues of human development, which are there are some debates and issues which keeps going on in every part of psychology. So these are the issues which were pertaining to human development. Then there are periods of development, lifespan perspective, contextual influences, and critical period that we will study under human development. So let's begin with this as a little introduction today. And human development is described as what? Development is a progressive holistic change, which is orderly progressive holistic change of an individual. So it's about being holistic, being progressive, and being orderly. So that's called what is development. Development just not involves biological and physical, but other kinds also, which is social, psychological, and cognitive. Some topical area of these is physical, cognitive, personality, and social. So what all we understand in a person, like what do we understand in a child if we see him? Physical development, which talks about his body, physiological body, which is nervous system, genetic diseases, genes, any sort of nutrition deficiency, availability of nutrition, the brain development. Cognitive development focuses the capacity of thinking, reasoning, problem solving, decision making that does impact growth at a greater level. Then personality. Personality is a very holistic term. How do you represent yourself in the world, which can cause both deviances and cause, a good representation of you. Then we talk about social development. Social development are psychological attempts to understand how people interact with other people in society. So that's social. These are four topical areas where we'll always see development in every period, in every stage of humans. Now, when I say period and stage, what is lifespan? Is it different from human development? Lifespan is a pattern of change that begins at conception and continues till death. So its lifespan. Also, it can be defined as a methodological intra-individual change associated with progression corresponding to age, which is, this definition says that it is methodological, which is there are methods, there are intra-individual change, which is every individual in terms of development is different from one another, and every development has a stage. So infancy, that's what they're trying to mention, that we develop in terms of progression. What we have as infant is what childhood will have better. What we have in childhood would be better in adolescence. So we are progressing and we are going in different stages corresponding to different age. So stage one would be something 0 to 2 and 2 to 4. Age is changing, progression is happening, stages are changing. So the Levinson mentioned that life cycle comprises of 25 years of eras, and according to that, we have approximately four periods: a child, an adolescent, early adulthood, middle, and later. So according to Levinson, every stage is 25 years of span, and it's child and adolescent, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and later adulthood. According to Levinson. What are the factors impacting human development? There are many factors impacting human development, if we see. So, some of the factors why your development is heredity. Heredity is something which will always impact us. Our genetic code, our AGCT as a combination, which dictates our growth, our height, our weight, our complexion, our hair quality. Socioeconomic condition also impacts human development. Kind of economic value that a child is growing in, the healthcare facility, education facilities that they get, impacts child to a greater level. The better the economic facility is, more social interactive opportunities children get, I feel. So again, let's compare a rural area child from an urban area child. You'll see how development is so different with the two people because of the socio-economic differences that we have. Then hormonal differences could be understood in the autonomic nervous system that leads to endocrine glands, like how endocrine glands impact human development. It is very true, women goes through a lot of concern with PCOS and PCOD, which is completely a concern of thyroxine. Thyroxine, if increased and lesser in amount, leads to laziness, lethargy, weight gain, which changes how we look forward to our personality and our living also in society. So impact of hormones on the body and development. Then is nutrition. Nutrition talks about the body requiring optimal amount of nutrition. Undernutrition, malnutrition can lead to brain diseases, further could lead to lack in development. Overnutrition could probably lead to weight gains, obesity, etc. And then we talk about race. Race being the last talks about unique physical characteristics that impact your interaction with society, and your being and your culture is different from the other people, which is even ethnicity that we talk about. So this is factors which are influencing human development. After this, we move to the last factor, which is culture. Culture is very similar to race, but culture is something which is more holistic. It comprises of language, values, custom, rituals, and the conduct which are under a culture. So, I'm sure our culture is different from even the neighbors who are next door. They live differently, talk differently. Remember, their children, that's the reason, are different from us. They have different rules, different roles, different rituals, ceremonies, and value systems. And we has a different value system. Culture has a huge impact on everything: intelligence, personality, development, etc. After this, moving to the last, which is issues of human development that we will continue with. Issues are usually talking about that, there is always a debate that human development is comprising of either this or that. So that's why issues of human development came into place. We will continue with this. There are three issues: nature and nurture, one of the most common, which is heredity and environment. Then there is development stable or changing all the time? Then third is development continuous or discontinuous. So this speaks of the fact nature and nurture is always there. Is development of outproduct of your environment or heredity or gene, which is it your you're completely outproduct of your parents or environment. Then talking about development being stable, always remains same or keeps changing. This completes with issues of human development that we continue with and finishes our class for today. Thank you.